ANC National Executive Committee is meeting today to process policy discussion documents. This in preparation for the party's National Policy Conference later this year. For more on this, we're joined by the ANC spokesperson, Pule Mabe. Thank you very much for your time this morning, Pule. Maybe just furnish us with some of the discussion points, the most important that will dominate your discussions among the executive.
Good day and good day to your viewers. Today, our National Executive Committee is meeting in a special session to process policy discussion documents in preparation for the National Policy Conference. Of course, we are covering a broad range of areas here. Economic transformation, dealing with communication and the battle of ideas, social transformation, looking into the arena of local government, and a myriad of issues really that arise out of the work being done by a number of subcommittees of the African National Congress. Where when we rise here, we'll at least have formulated a view, and we'd also have agreed on an approach to then begin distributing this discussion document out to the public, so that our structures could also begin making sure that they familiarize themselves with the documents to prepare themselves for the policy conference as well. The expectation is that just after this policy conference, we will have a post-special NEC briefing, which will also accord us an opportunity to formally now distribute this out to the public.
So the economy is quite important, and it's quite encouraging that it's quite high up in terms of your policy documents and the discussion therein. But over the last few months, Mr. Pule Mabe, we've seen a lot of disputes within the ANC in the various provinces. I mean, we've concluded the KZN provincial conference that happened. The one in the Eastern Cape is finally going to take place after those disputes. Surely this must concern the party to some degree, in that you're not able to follow through on those commitments because of the various issues that rear their heads constantly.
Well, I'm not sure if I understand your question. Are you talking about disputes in our organizational structures? Just want to make sure that I'm answering the right question. Is that what
That's
you are
right, yes.
Well, one of the issues that are being discussed here at this special agency is the question of organizational renewal, where we now begin reflecting and saying, what kind of organizational structures do we want to have on the ground? What will guide our decade-long program on renewal? And remember, in the past, we had a program called the Decade of the Cadre, because now all of our efforts are focused on renewal. It means we now need to then say, in the next 10 years, what are the efforts that the ANC has got to undertake to drive the kind of renewal that it wants? What we now began doing was that this year, in January, at the back of the 110th anniversary, we then, on the NEC statement delivered by our President Cyril Ramaphosa, we then spoke about the establishment of the Renewal Commission. The NEC then took that work further forward, came and pronounced on the names of those men and women who are expected to serve in that way.
Pule Mabe, can you still hear me? If you can, please continue with your answer. It appears that we've lost Pule Mabe, and I mean, there are a lot of contentious issues that we need to address when it comes to the ANC. I was going to ask him as well about the step-aside policy of the ANC and it causing so much confusion within the organization. So clarity on that in terms of the discussion document that will be produced on that, and of course the implication that it will have on various recently elected leaders that probably shouldn't be within the the executive ranks of the ANC, given the clouds that hang over some of them. But that is a conversation that we will continue should we get him back on the line. Let's take you back to KwaZulu-Natal now, where Premier Sihle Zikalala will later today provide an update on government's response to the devastating floods. Now, he's expected to detail progress in providing humanitarian relief, the rehousing of people who lost their homes, and the rehabilitation and reconstruction of infrastructure. Parliament will be meeting on Tuesday to discuss ways to address the KZN food crisis. And before we take you back to that story, I understand that we've got Pule Mabe back on the line. Pule, let's continue our conversation. You were making a point about organizational renewal based on some of the factional issues that we've seen rear their heads over the last few months.
Yes, the point I was making is that to deal with the concerns that you have raised on whether we will be able to really have a policy conference in a more harmonious environment, given some of the challenges we're having, then I was making a point that we have steamed ahead with the rollout of our renewal program. And this has been seen through us at the back of the 110th anniversary pronouncing on the establishment of the Renewal Commission. Yesterday, here in Mangaung, with the president of the ANC, again we launched the National Letsema campaign, which is really about forging and strengthening our social contract of renewal with the people. So all of these are actually a commitment on our part to make sure that the renewal that we are talking about is one that reads the ANC out of tendencies that also pose a threat to its own existential crisis as well. So we've got to then say, what are the things that if we do not attend to will really compromise and debase the ANC as that representative of the people and champion of transformation? So when we deal with policy documents, especially on renewal, we have got to now look at the kind of an organization that we want. One, we have to make sure that when our people attend, when our comrades attend conferences, they understand what is their role, so that conferences are not just seen as gatherings that must produce leadership. They are effectively seen as true festival of ideas, where members of the African National Congress congregate, come together, express themselves on how they want to best strengthen the existence of their very organization, beyond just electing a leadership that must be able to lead that kind of a program. When all of these things are done, what they begin to do is that they then begin to isolate what appears to be conflict or tensions out there in the public, which is the issues that we are talking about. So this exercise that we are doing today, the meeting we are engaged in today, is very important to begin laying that kind of a ground, so that when our structures start making input on these documents, they to appreciate that it is in the interest of all of us to make sure that even the renewal of the organization is one that contributes to the continued existence of the African National Congress and assures everyone who is the member of the organization that they can be able to express their views regardless of who they support or who they do not support in the organization. So we need to mount an organization that really exists beyond individual leaders. So the exercise we're doing now is one that begins to now say, we have been too inward looking. What kind of an ANC do we want society to be able to see out there? What kind of characters, virtues must a member of the ANC be able to uphold? So when a member of the ANC walks out there, just through their conduct, character, and all of the values that they really hold on to, you could be able to say, but that one looks like an ANC member. So we've got to make, but part of that is going to take quite a lot of things. Beyond organizational renewal, there's also going to have to be work around political education. And what this collective has done, coming out of the 54th National Conference, was to establish the OR Tambo Political School that is headed by Comrade David Masondo. It has done quite a number of work, even our own councillors. Just part of the minimum threshold for one to be councillor, they had to demonstrate that they've at least done some basic courses with the OR Tambo Political School. This is a commitment on the part of the ANC to make sure that it builds the necessary capacity amongst its own cadres to be able to discharge the responsibility expected of them. So what we're doing here covers all of that. But not only that, we also look at the balance of forces, locate the role of the African National Congress, both in Africa, the diaspora, and even across on global politics.
Yeah.
What is our position on Ukraine, Russia, and many other issues in the world, in Africa, and all of that. So we deal with all of those things and then go on to deal with the communications and the battle of ideas. We have got DTT now, digital terrestrial television now. All of these are policy shifts that are happening in the broadcast space, having an impact even on the work that you yourselves in the broadcast space are expected to be doing as eNCA or SABC or any other one. You now have got a number of OTT platforms. People are now engaging with media different to how they did in the past. You know, you now have got print mediums who are no longer as strong as they were previously because people are now engaging a lot more on digital platforms. I'm better off reading stories on digital platforms than I would have done previously when I would have gone and bought a newspaper in the literal sense. So I've got to look at all of these things, but also go on and just on media and the battle of ideas, begin to say, just on media diversity, do we have sufficient platforms, sufficient mediums to allow our people to engage? The licensing framework, is it one that is enabling the licensing regulatory framework? Is it one that is enabling to allow space for community mediums to be able to exist? The funding that is available, is it sufficient to be able to boost the media diversity that we want? So under communication and battle of ideas, we begin looking at all of those things. So I'm just giving you some of the snippets of what really these discussions begin to zoom into. On economic transformation, again, I mean, the issue of the economy is not one that the ANC can be upset from. You know, we have spoken previously about the economic reconstruction and recovery plan. We now have got to say, on all the other issues that must contribute towards this economic reconstruction and recovery, are we having sufficient resources to be doing that work, whether it's on energy, whether it's on human settlement, whether it's on climate change.
Yeah.
I mean, for instance, the issue of flooding in KwaZulu-Natal, you cannot entirely divorce it from the question of climate change. What kind of mitigations, what kind of policies are we as the ANC putting forward to make sure that we can position our country better to be able to deal with all of these different challenges on education, health, science, and technology?
Yes.
We've got to also look at the problem, which is what we're doing now.
Yeah.
Look at the very question of the COVID-19 pandemic. What has been our response and all of that? And how do we continue to make sure that we have got programs on the ground that make sure that our people understand what is their responsibility and that we build the necessary capacity to be able
Pule Mabe,
to
I'm going to come in here only because we are running out of time. I have to ask you this before I let you go. I mean, you've said an array of different things that will be addressed. Very important, absolutely. But what about the step-aside policy of the ANC? What will that policy document look like? I mean, we've spoken to various analysts over the last few days, or weeks rather, who've said that it's actually causing confusion among members, and some even say it's a disaster. Will there be a review of the step-aside policy, some clarity to be provided in terms of how it is approached by the party?
Well, that's so that we are not far from the discussion itself. Matters of step-aside, literally speaking, they will then be located under organizational renewal. We say, okay, what are the things that we have done to effectively deal? What is it that we have implemented in the organization? What are the programs that we have rolled out to really respond to organizational renewal? We will say part of what we have implemented was the step-aside guidelines. You know, and these step-aside guidelines required that a cadre that is criminally charged or indicted to appear in a court of law, that cadre would have to step aside while their cases are being held, so that the ongoing part of their case and the work that they are expected to do in the organization are not in conflict. So when we do that kind of an assessment, so it will find expression under organizational renewal. And we'll also have to say that have we strengthened these guidelines enough to be able to provide common clarity amongst members and leaders of the African National Congress on the execution and how we go about really executing this, and what is the alignment of the work that we are doing around this guideline with the Constitution of the African National Congress and all other policy prescripts of the organization. So this work is quite critical to really guide our resolve and common understanding on the implementation of these various policy positions that the ANC has even went on to implement through the National Executive Committee. Because remember this, the NEC does not pass resolutions. The role of the National Executive Committee is to implement decisions of conferences. So the very resolution on stepping aside as part of organizational renewal was a decision taken by the 54th National Conference. What we have to do, empowered by the Constitution, is to make sure that we then develop a set of guidelines to then say, okay, we have got all these resolutions that the conference has required us to implement. We need guidelines to really be able to then govern and guide our work as it relates to the execution and implementation of those. So this one specifically will then have tasked a team led by our Treasurer General, Comrade Pule Mabe, to deal with the process of developing those guidelines, bring them back to the National Executive Committee. Once they were ratified and adopted by the NEC, we then went on with their implementation. We empowered all our provincial and regional structures to implement them. And I must say that those cadres that were affected by these guidelines, at the conclusion of conferences where they would have been nominated and ultimately made themselves available, these cadres will have done the honor, wrote to the organization that while their cases are still going, while they recognize their election, but while their cases are still going on, they will be stepping aside from that responsibility as required by the African National Congress. This is a demonstration and display of discipline on their part, because stepping aside, something that we need to clarify with the media, stepping aside does not in any way suggest that a cadre is guilty of wrongdoing. Because as you know, as per the laws of the Republic, a person is presumed innocent until proven guilty by a court of law. So all of these people all of these comrades that have stepped aside are not guilty of any wrongdoing. They could be charged and appearing before court, but they are not guilty of any wrongdoing.
Yes.
So to project them as if that they are guilty, so now they must now prove their innocence, is rather being unfair. When the ANC passed the resolution on stepping aside and ultimately developed its own guidelines, the ANC was not passing a guilt verdict on any of its cadre who could be charged, who could be criminally charged. No. They are making themselves available to law enforcement.
But Mr. Pule Mabe, then why?
Can I conclude my point? Can I conclude my point?
No, I hear your point. I think we're on the same page in terms of the point that you're making. So perhaps while you make that final point of yours, why is there confusion amongst members about the actual policy then?
Well, there is no confusion. I think maybe the confusion is with members of the media. Members of the ANC are not confused. That's why I think what we need to do is that appreciate that where it's confused, when members of the media are confused about resolutions of the ANC, they must say so. They must not attribute their confusion to members of the ANC. The fact that those that are affected by this policy are themselves stepping aside, it means they are not confused. Again, when you are confused, you will do something different. They are not confused. So the fact that after being elected, they step aside, it means they are not confused. So again, let me repeat, confusion could be amongst yourselves in the media. Appreciate, members of the ANC are not confused. So we must never plant our confusion and make it a confusion of ANC structure. They are not confused. Mam Zandile has written to the ANC and affirmed the resolution of the ANC and said that he will be stepping aside. Comrade Mandla Msibi has done the same. So where is confusion then? There's no confusion.
I mean, to be fair, Mr. Mandla Msibi indicated when he was elected at that provincial conference that he would not be stepping aside because he hasn't been found guilty of anything, and then suddenly he had to. I don't know. So I think there's a lot of back and forth within the party, Mr. Pule Mabe, and I think that you cannot say that it's the media that is confused. I think that the ANC is quite confused itself in terms of actually actioning its own policies. And I think that is the big problem here.
Okay, that's fine. Let me come in. First, let me correct what you said. I don't want to call it a lie because it is that. But let me correct the incorrect, the wrongful assertion you made. Comrade Mandla never said he's not going to be stepping aside. He wrote to the ANC himself. You know, so when the Treasurer General, so I don't know where you get this.
We had an interview with him on the channel. It was live.
Okay, no, that's fine. But you see, so we have got it on record where he was saying that he's gonna be stepping aside in line with the ANC policy himself. You know, so I don't want to say this is a lie, this is correct, and all of that. But what I can confirm to you is that the ANC is not confused. Let's respect the African National Congress. We are not confused. You know that you people have got a platform called media does not mean that you wield maximum knowledge and wisdom about the African National Congress. The reason you call us to come to your programs is to come and clarify your viewers.
Yes.
So now in the process of us clarifying your viewers, you then get in between because it's in your interest to see confusion in the ANC. Let's say there was confusion.
No, it's not in our interest, Mr. Pule Mabe, but I don't want us to debate our disrespect or otherwise of the ANC or anything else. I just want to stick to facts that are important, only because we're running out of time. So I do need you to get to the nub of whatever point you're trying to make when you answer a question. Unfortunately, we've just got time against us. That is the big problem. A final thought from you. What about Ms. Batambile Dlamini, who was recently convicted? She's still leading the ANC Women's League. What is the position of the party there?
Well, the party has pronounced itself many a times on this. There is an internal process that the organization has spoken to, and once the organization concludes that internal process, if there is a requirement for the organization to come and pronounce itself out to the public, we will do so. But where we are now, there is no crisis. No crisis at all. These are internal matters of organization.
It's quite contradictory, though. But
what's contradictory?
It's quite contradictory that she still runs a division of the organization despite a conviction. Those others that have stepped aside are doing so during pending cases. Mr. Pule Mabe, we have run out of time, unfortunately. We have to leave it there.
No, but you don't understand how the ANC works. That's the problem. You don't understand how the ANC works, and you use the space that you've got this platform to cut us even while we're still clarifying you. You are confusing your viewers. It's not necessary.
I don't think our viewers are very confused at all.
No, if they are not, it's you who's confused, not the viewers. You are, because you are the one running the show. Do this, man. Listen to us. You have never left the ANC. Can you just listen to us? Allow us to clarify you on how the ANC works. You have never been elected at a branch of the ANC, never led the structure of the ANC.
No, I have not indeed. No. I have not indeed, and this is, of course, not a personal matter. Let's leave it there, Mr. Pule Mabe. Thank you for clarifying some of the different issues that we've been addressing today. We will engage you on another platform. Thank you very much for your time this morning, Mr. Pule Mabe, joining us there. Unfortunately, we have run out of time, and of course, the ANC as a structure will be given a platform to engage us further on this apparent confusion that we have about how the ANC runs its ranks. Of course, I have never been a member, like he says, and so we'll give them that platform.